Hey everybody, welcome back. This week I'm going to be talking about what you should do in the aftermath of discovering that your spouse has had an affair. And the first thing I can recommend, and I cannot recommend it strongly enough, is that you've got to get help ASAP. You cannot do this alone. It's the biggest mistake that I see couples do over and over again. Sometimes they try to do it for months, and sometimes they try to do it for years. They try to recover from infidelity or the discovery of a sexual addiction, and they try to do it alone. And you just cannot do it. And as I think back on my own journey of infidelity recovery 27 years ago, and I think about how enormous the task ahead seemed, I'm reminded of a Martin Luther King quote. He said, you have to take the first step in faith. You don't have to see the whole staircase ahead of you. You just have to take that first step. And I think infidelity recovery is a lot like that. You just have to get started. And usually with somebody that knows what they're doing and has been down that road before. And a great first step is to take the Affair Analyzer at affairrecovery.com. The Affair Analyzer is a short assessment. It's a tool that was developed by Rick many years ago, and it has over 600 outcomes. It takes just a few minutes for you to do it, but what you get back is a one-page or a little bit more sometimes, and it's a roadmap that briefly describes what the affair recovery journey looks like for you and your spouse. We paint a broad brushstroke with the work we do many times, but with each couple, there are nuances that are specific to you. And that Affair Analyzer is a free tool, and it can be a really helpful beginning. Another early step in the process of recovery and restoration, I want you to consider doing the First Steps Bootcamp at Affair Recovery. It is a free resource. It's online. It's a week-long program that just simply shows you the steps involved in working a good recovery program. It is a great first step. And then from there are several options. But I want to pause for a minute and talk about the way I see recovery. I think of it as there are 4 pillars or buckets, or however you want to see this. And the first thing is disclosure. There's a lot of controversy around discovery and disclosure and how much to disclose, whether it's a full therapeutic discovery or disclosure, or what do you need to know? Rick and I tend to believe that a full therapeutic disclosure, those things that are out there right now, can sometimes create more damage. I don't believe that you need to know every single detail. You get to decide what it is you do need to know. And for some people, they decide they need to know everything. And that is your right and your choice. Please hear me in that. But I don't think it's going to make recovery or restoration easier for you. I do think in that disclosure process, you do need to know how and when did the affair start? How often did they meet and where? Who else knows about the affair? What was the theme? Was it sexual, emotionally entangled, somewhere in between, both? I want to promise you that I just don't think you need to know every single detail to heal. The research shows that. There are other experts in the field that agree with us, and there are experts that disagree with us. I just want to say, as the betrayed spouse, I really believe you're the one that gets to decide. But every detail you know has the potential to create some intrusive thoughts that could prolong your own healing and the healing of the relationship. So you need a qualified therapist to walk with you, to help you, to guide you in this process. I don't think you can do it by yourself. And having said that, it's probably a good idea for the unfaithful spouse to do a full disclosure with himself or herself, with a therapist or a coach or a guide, so that they can better understand why they did what they did. But I don't know that you need to see all those details for the betrayed spouse. So that's the first pillar. The second is empathy. In Affair Recovery, we spend a lot of time on development and the communication of empathy. A simple definition of empathy is putting yourself in someone else's shoes and take a walk in there. And so whether it's at the EMS weekend or online or Harboring Hope or Hope for Healing, there's a lot of emphasis on empathy. We see that as the antidote, the big antidote here. You spend a lot of time there with us. And the third is forgiveness. When I'm working with a couple, I don't even talk about forgiveness for probably pretty close to a year. Every couple's a little different because there's so many milestones and things that need to be accomplished before you can even begin to talk about forgiveness in my way of thinking. And with that, I want to tell people all the time, you have the free will and the choice not to forgive. That is your right as well. But holding a grudge and not forgiving probably is not going to be good for you personally, and it won't be good for the relationship. I don't know how relationships can continue if forgiveness isn't there. And again, I'm talking at least a year down the road. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years to get there. And what I ask betrayed spouses to do is just to be open to it someday. And, even if your spouse doesn't take full responsibility for the infidelity, you can still forgive them. Even if the marriage dissolves, you still can forgive. And I think that's a much better way to go. Even forgive the affair partner sometime. And I know that can trigger a lot of people, and I don't want to do that. I'm just going to paint a really broad brushstroke of what I think the steps look like and what's possible. And then the last pillar is this co-creation of a new relationship. Very few couples that I have ever worked with, and I've been doing this a long time, want to go back to the marriage that they had. One might see it differently than the other, but for most people, they don't want to go back to what they had. And I think even by starting the process, by being transparent, telling the truth, learning to express empathy both ways, not just the unfaithful spouse, but the betrayed spouse too, and having better and more intimate conversations. And usually that starts about 3 or 4 months down the road for a lot of couples. Intimacy just skyrockets, even over something as hurtful and damaging as an affair. But it can happen. It happens all the time. So being committed to co-creating a new relationship and investing in that relationship from here to the end of time, if you will, I think that's another really key pillar. So there's your 4 pillars, the way I see this whole recovery process going. And in all that, there's other tools. Whether you use Affair Recovery's tools or somebody else's, you've got to do something. I cannot stress enough that another place to start or the next step would be the EMS weekend. I love that program. It's 3 intense days of getting to the truth of what has happened, the barriers to recovery, expressing empathy, challenging what your ideas about what marriage really is and what it should look like. It's a great tool. Go read some of the reviews on the Affair Recovery website. If you can't make it to the weekend, I'd encourage you to do the EMS online. It's the online version of the weekend. And both of those come with a full year of support from Affair Recovery after those programs are over. For the money, I don't know that there's anything else out there. And I sound like I'm selling these products. I don't work for Affair Recovery. They do contract with me, but I'm in private practice. And I know what those programs are like because I went through one of them 26, 27 years ago. I know the results of them. They're awesome. So even as I'm talking about this, I'm reminded that the title of this newsletter is My Spouse Just Had an Affair, What Should I Do? And through the coursework that Affair Recovery offers, one of the things that we really strive to create is a sense of community that gets people out of isolation and rebuilds your confidence so that you step out of this potential to become a victim or to stay there. That is a a big roadblock for a lot of people, and I hear it frequently. When I hear things like, I deserve better, I didn't ask for this, those are certainly true. But there's this balance of you can stay stuck there, that this isn't fair, or you can choose to move forward. You heard me say it a few minutes ago. I believe in free will and choice more strongly than I believe in anything on this planet. And we get to choose as adults. We didn't always get to choose when we were kids, but we do now how we move forward. So I just want to say that. Hopefully that's helpful to get you out of that potential just to stay in that victim mentality. And if you look at our world in a broader sense, we see that everywhere we turn around right now. So just a couple other ideas that I have is that there are two other courses at A Fair Recovery. One is Harboring Hope. That is a course for betrayed spouses. And then Hope for Healing. It's a course for the unfaithful spouses. And in both of those, what we strive to provide is community so that you know that you're not alone. We want to kill shame and fear and guilt and isolation and even apathy. So in both of those courses, Harboring Hope was developed and written by Leslie and John, and Hope for Healing was written by Rick. They're safe places to find freedom and gain some understanding that propels you to move you forward individually, regardless of what happens to the marriage. And I know there's some uncertainty out there sometimes about where do I start. For most couples, Leslie and I were talking about this last week. We think you ought to start with the EMS weekend if you can. If you can't do the weekend, do the online course. Do those first. They serve as such the foundation and the building blocks for everything else. For some couples, we realize they're not ready to do some work together. So start with one of the other courses that's appropriate for you. But for most people, if you can, that weekend is just amazing. I cannot stress it enough. So just in closing, what I really want you to know is that the research shows that you cannot do this alone. I've never seen that. Research shows that there is a need for individual work, some couples work, some group work, and you can't do all that at the same time. So you have to find some things that resonate with you and meet you right where you are today. And hopefully at A Fair Recovery, there's some tools there and support that's going to do exactly just that. You cannot do this alone. You both need support without shame, without guilt, without fear. Lots of remorse for sure, but you're going to need that support to navigate the nuances of a good recovery program. So thanks so much for joining me. It's always good to be with you. I'll be back again next week. Stay safe and stay well, and I'll see you soon.